So, Paula, if you want to start the recording.
Okay, it started.
Okay, at 6:30, I will call the September 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with the introduction of planning commissioners. Scott Nelson, District 3. Donna?
Donna Dickerson, District 3.
Don? You're muted, Don.
Don DeHaan, District 1.
Doug?
Doug Carmen, District 2.
Ed?
Ed Fleischer, District 2.
Eric?
Eric Casino, District 2.
Jim?
Jim Simmons, District 3.
Okay, I think that's everybody. Did I miss anyone? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to have the section under the SMP removed. The updates that they've been going to ecology to get are not there yet. A sample of the updated version of chapter 5 that I was sent was empty. I just don't think we're ready to evaluate the quantity of input from the public at this time, and it would be redundant use of our time. We could do it better later. So I'd move to remove that from the agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'd second.
Any discussion? So I guess I'll go. I mean, I understand your concern, Doug, but I think there's stuff that we can discuss. And I don't think we're not going to get through the whole thing tonight. But I think if people have questions or comments for staff, we've got time in the meeting. Let's cover what we can tonight.
I could see doing chapter 1 to 300 because they're fairly simple chapters, but we also could zip through those pretty darn fast. But once you get to 400 and beyond, there's too much that's not there yet. So I'd be willing to modify it to include only up to chapter 3, through chapter 3. Eric, you okay with that?
I'd be okay with that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to limit discussion on the shoreline master plan to chapters 100, 200, and 300. Any discussion? Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. All those in favor, I guess, any more discussion on the agenda? All those in favor of approving the amended agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll move into public communications. And just a reminder, if you wish to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. If you're calling in, it's *9 to raise your hand. I'll unmute you when it's your turn to speak. If you're on the phone, you can also choose *6 to unmute yourself. The 3-minute timer will be on the screen, and a reminder that we can't take comment on things that we've already had a public hearing on, which I think at this point just include the comprehensive plan. So start with Howard Glassstetter.
Good evening. My name is Howard Glassstetter. I have lived in the Nisqually Valley for over 50 years. I currently live on Coleman Road, about 1/3 mile from Lakeside's asphalt plant. I was a member of the Thurston County Asphalt Advisory Task Force in 2007 and 2008. I have submitted oral and written comments on RAP issues over the past several years. Some of them are currently on current records. The Lakeside's plant is located at Holroyd's Nisqually Valley Pit in the Thurston County Wellhead Protected Area. The pit sits above a CARA 1 critical aquifer recharge area, which means extreme sensitivity to pollution. 1 year travel to wells. All Nisqually Valley residents get potable water from the nearby Lacey Water Municipal Well or their own wells. The last Planning Commission member made a request for speakers at this meeting. One of the speakers they asked for was Kevin Hansen. And I see he's not on the agenda, so I would like to quote something that a handout that he gave at a October 3rd, 2018 Thurston County Mineral Lands meeting. It's the document is called Review of Thurston County Code Section 17.20 on mineral land extraction and asphalt production in conjunction with the expanded mineral lands designation. He makes the point, asphalt batch plants present less risks to groundwater than concrete plants. The potential risk from asphalt plants is mainly from the effects of storm water, vehicle fueling, and fuel storage handling. However, asphalt plants are still a very significant source of risk to groundwater quality and require adequate regulatory oversight. The key word here is storm water. An unwalled building over the recycled asphalt, ground up recycled asphalt pavement will prevent storm water from leaching from the RAP pile. This is a best management practice. It should be required for this sensitive site. The asphalt plant currently has the capability of producing 300 tons of asphalt per hour. So it's a very large plant and should have the best management practice in that plant. And my view is no building over the RAP, no RAP. So if it comes in at all, it should have an unwalled building above the RAP pile. I also heard at the
I have to ask you to wrap it up, Howard.
Well, I'll wrap it up real quick. This meeting is going to be later followed by a request from Holroyd. I understand, I heard it from the Nisqually River Council meeting that Holroyd still wants to use a drag bucket and go 100 feet below the water table. There's no way that this should follow up on the asphalt plant issue. So I just would like you people to think hard about not just the one thing that's coming up, but the one thing that's following. Thank you.
Okay, Phyllis Farrell.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to comment in opposition to the removal of the prohibition of recycled asphalt in the Nisqually Valley. considered in the Nisqually Sub-Area Plan Review. I am representing the South Sound Sierra Club group, representing over 1,400 members and supporters in Thurston County. We object to the proposal by Lakeside Industry to remove the prohibition on the manufacture of recycled asphalt in the Nisqually Valley being considered in the Sub-Area Plan Review. The goal of the 1992 Sub-Area Plan was to, quote, maintain the existing rural environment of the Nisqually planning area with a primary emphasis on preserving its rural aesthetic character for future generations, end quote. There was a no-wrap provision in policy E5, which states, quote, the reprocessing of asphalt shall not be allowed due to water quality concerns, end quote. Okay, there have been previous attempts to amend or revoke the prohibition, but they have failed for good reason. The Nisqually sub-area includes critical aquifer recharge areas and the McAllister geologically sensitive area, which is a CARA. By definition, they are vulnerable to contamination. Thurston County successfully litigated this provision against Lakeside in 2004, the court noting, quote, the proposed asphalt facility would be approximately 2 miles upwind and upriver from the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, home to numerous wildlife species and endangered salmon. The groundwater around the mine site is between 4 and 15 feet below the extremely porous surface. Its site is also located in the county's Aquifer Protection District. The county has spent approximately $2.4 million to purchase development rights in the immediate area adjacent to the proposed facility to prevent environmental damage. It's close, the site is close to the Nisqually River in a 100-year floodplain and close to drinking water sources. What could possibly go wrong? These recycled asphalt could potentially leak harmful chemicals threatening water quality and Nisqually River fish stocks. And increased truck traffic would impair the rural character of the area. And to my knowledge, there's not been a SEPA determination of this proposal. WAC 197-11-055 states, quote, the SEPA process shall be integrated with agency activities at the earliest possible time to ensure that planning and decisions reflect environmental values, to avoid delays later in the process, and to seek to resolve potential problems. The Planning Commission should have this information before making any recommendations. The South Sound Sierra Club Group opposes the removal of the prohibition of the manufacture of recycled asphalt from the Sub-Area 5 section of the comp plan due to environmental concerns. Thank you.
Okay, Barry Halverson. You're muted, Barry.
Thank you. My name is Barry Halverson. I'm with the Lake Lawrence Lake Management District. I'm part of the coalition for the Shoreline Stakeholders Coalition that John Woodford is our chair. And I sent an email to Andrew yesterday. Jennifer, I don't know if he's there or if he got it. But I read the entire plan or the program, and I found an error in Appendix A that deals with Lake Lawrence on pages 56 and 57 that I'd like him to address. It deals with the environmental designations report. There's discrepancies there that the map from 2017 doesn't match the words in Appendix A is the primary problem. Additionally, John, you should have received these, sent a couple letters to you. One of them is the coalition key SMP issues. There's 12 issues there. The Shoreline Stakeholders Coalition was formed to provide a coordinated and consistent message about what is important to all of us around the Thurston County area, the lakes and rivers. And although John Woodford is our chairman, he has been the point man for this effort. He has received input from hundreds of shoreline property owners, as I have. I represent 143 property owners out here at Lake Lawrence. We felt it was better this way than hundreds of individuals emailing and calling staff about their respective issues. So we got all of our issues together. We coordinated this with John Woodford and the other members of the coalition. And John put this letter together, and we've been submitting these issues repeatedly over the last couple of years. I want you to understand that these property owners, hundreds of them, are closely watching this situation. When we get done with this thing, I'll send them out an email to all my members, as John will to everybody that is in his coalition. And if these issues are not addressed, you will hear from all of them. We would prefer that not happen at hearings. As Brad Murphy knows, when he first kicked this off in 2017, and many of you commissioners were at these meetings, the first couple of meetings in 2017 on the SMP were packed with dozens of very vocal and intense property owners. There's going to be a repeat of that if we go to a hearing without these issues being resolved. So what we want is we want to know what you intend to do with the 12 issues that we have provided. Are they going to be incorporated into the plan? Are some of them going to be incorporated into the plan? And which ones won't be, and why not? And we need an answer on that before this hearing. Like I said, I just reread the entire draft, and I haven't seen any of these issues addressed in that draft. And after reading it for the third time in the last 2 years, I found another error in Appendix A, which I forwarded to Andrew yesterday. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate all your effort. It's a volunteer job, and it's a hell of a job, and it takes a lot of time. And I appreciate you letting me talk to you tonight. Thank you.
John Woodford.
Commissioners, this is John Woodford from Long Lake, and as Barry mentioned, I am chair of the Thurston County Shoreline Stakeholders Coalition. I sent you 2 letters, which I think have been delivered. One is 12 key issues that we have, and another was a focus on the conforming versus non-conforming for properties in the buffer. I frankly think all of those issues are no-brainers, and these have been issues we've been talking about literally for years, and we've seen no action from staff to address them. I'm also rather shocked to find out that there's a newly amended SMP that apparently has been released to you planning commissioners, but it's not been released to the public. I think that's abhorrent anyway. And I also just want to comment again, and I've talked about this before. Almost 2.5 years ago, the public has been completely excluded from these proceedings and the processes. We had stakeholder meetings, and then Brad Murphy had to institute a pause, or not, a pause was instituted on his behalf to finish writing the document. The assumption that we all had was that those community stakeholder meetings would resume following the pause, but they were not. In fact, I made numerous requests to staff and to the commission. Why is the public being excluded from this whole process? And I've never gotten an answer. And the question still is out there. Why is all of the public being blocked from this whole process? That's all I got to say now. I just hope that you read my letters and understand that a lot of thought and work went into developing those ideas. We tried to minimize the number of issues. We could expand it greatly, but please read those letters, take them seriously, and understand that they were done with very serious concern. Thank you.
Shelley Neep.
Hi, my name is Shelley Knipe, pronounced the K, and I want to speak to some concerns about the entire comp plan update process. The Planning Commission, you are in a
Shelley,
very,
I'm
pardon?
gonna have to stop you. We have already had our public hearing on the comp plan, so we cannot take other comments on the comp plan.
Well, isn't the RAP an amendment to the comprehensive plan?
Yes, but it's our comp plan update.
Okay, I want to talk about process. Is that okay?
Yeah, if you're talking about the
So
wrap
for
stuff,
the
that's
RAP and the mineral lands and the shoreline master program, you as the planning commission are a very important part of that process and the decision making. I think you would agree. And you should be entitled to all the information that's needed to make your recommendation. But Thurston County defers your SEPA analysis until after you make a recommendation, which doesn't make sense. SEPA, as you know, is the State Environmental Policy Act. It requires that all governmental agencies consider the environmental effects of a proposed action. And I think another commenter referenced WAC 197.11.055. It's a SEPA rule. And it's been adopted by reference by Thurston County in the Code Section 1709.020, requires that SEPA be considered at the earliest possible time in the planning process. And Thurston County Code 1709.050 specifically references the Planning Commission. The SEPA review should have happened before it came to you. A proposal exists when the county receives an application or has any goal that it needs to make a decision on. And earlier this year in May, the Central Puget Sound Growth Management Board found a King County development regulation, a land use regulation, non-compliant with GMA because they did the SEPA analysis too late in the process. I think you need to have the SEPA information before you make a recommendation. It's a fatal flaw if you do not, and you could have the whole thing overturned.
Hey, Adam.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you for your service. The community really appreciates it. I purchased a house in Lacey 5 years ago to retire in, and it's on Long Lake. I attended the public meetings that John Woodford spoke about earlier that were being held and then canceled. So I think I've been doing my best to keep up with all the information that's put out. I live on a fully developed lake, and my house was built in the 50s. I understand the SMP program has been kicked down the road for years, and you guys are now stuck with completing it because of a state deadline. I feel the conforming, non-conforming, legally non-conforming naming of existing houses is a money grab. The only reason you would want to separate the waterfront owners from the other 90% of the public is to charge them more later. All existing waterfront houses should be grandfathered in and follow the same rules as the rest of the state. We already pay more in property taxes because of the property values. We pay a lake committee to upkeep the lake so the community can enjoy it. And now we're being separated from the rest of the community. So you can charge us more for permits and upkeep to fund other projects later on. We were told at the beginning of this process that the rules would not be any more restrictive than the state's requirements, and I hope you can stick with the statement. My house is 70 years old. People that have lived in the house have been founders and people in this community. And I know it's going to need work in the future because it is 7 years old, and I don't feel that I should have to pay more or jump through any more hoops than the state minimum. Thank you very much.
Hey, can we get your last name? Because I didn't catch it.
Fawcett, Faussett.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Annabelle Kirschner.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to briefly address the issue of recycled asphalt in the Nisqually area. It's my understanding that the mining company Lakeside is seeking permission to store recycled asphalt at its operation in the Nisqually watershed. My question is, why are we even considering this request? Since in the 1990s and again in 2000 something, this was denied. And people said this should not be done in the Nisqually area because it is a fragile aquifer. Has something changed dramatically in the last 15 years to make the Nisqually Delta not a fragile aquifer? I'm not aware of those changes. I really think you should have simply referred Lakeside to the previous decision rather than wasting the time, your time and our time on recycled asphalt in the Nisqually area. I am strongly against this. Others have pointed out the importance of the Delta for a number of issues. Why we are even doing this when previous decisions have said you shouldn't, I don't know. So no recycled asphalt, please. Lakeside needs to shut down, finish up their operation, and do the remedial work that a mining company is supposed to do when they're done with their operation. Thank you. And once again, like others have said, you guys are a bunch of heroes for taking on this task. Thank you for doing that.
Dave Ellison. Dave, if you can hear me, you're muted.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, I got you now.
You got me now?
Yes.
All right. So can you hear me? I don't care if I see you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I lived on Patterson Lake here next to the boat ramp. I bought this place in like the mid 80s and I've seen a lot of changes and we're talking about shoreline management. Okay, so what's going on is somehow the boat ramp right next door to me on the fence line is open 24/7. So what's going on is we're having parties down here. I called the sheriff's office. Now, wait a second. Listen to me. I called the sheriff's office and they say to call the Fish and Wildlife. I call Fish and Wildlife. They say to call the sheriff's office. What it comes down to, I need to contact the city commissioners. Okay, I got 3 minutes, right? So the other night at midnight, there was kayakers out in the lake, okay? And it was a dark moon. You guys just, at the first of the year, came out here and rescued a man. Well, he didn't rescue him, you found him. He drowned. This is a public concern. If you can't maintain that boat ramp, shut it down. I'm telling you what, there's problems out here. That's what I gotta say. And as far as the other stuff, the shoreline management, all that weed stuff that the boats churn up comes right to my property. My property is so filled with lily pads and weeds, I can't maintain it anymore. I don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. And I really think the county ought to help me. If we're gonna keep these lakes clean, we need to start, at the base panel, close the boat ramp down and help me clean up this waterfront. Everything blows towards me. Thank you for understanding me and not counting me out. I appreciate that. That's it.
Curtis Cleveland.
I'm mute. Good afternoon. Thanks for listening to me. I'm speaking basically in support of Mr. Barry Halverson and John Woodford. I'm aware. I'm actually on the Lake Management District Finance Committee, just as a volunteer also. And we're hearing more and more from people who are concerned about what's going on. Mainly, of course, a lot of properties. My own property is 72 years old. It's going non-conforming. And there does seem to be, I think it was Mr. Fawcett that might have said, there does seem to be this idea that if we'd like to make changes, we can make changes, get permits, it's just going to cost more. And that is a common perception. With that, I'll relinquish my time, as they say. Thank you very much.
Dan Moffett.
Can you hear me? Am I
Yes.
unmuted now? All right. Thank you for letting me comment tonight. I'm Dan Moffett, an owner of freshwater and saltwater property in Thurston County. I agree with all the comments and concerns presented by Barry Halverson and John Woodford, and I would like to have each of those addressed by the commission specifically, not at this moment, but over the course of this plan development. I have some specific points to bring to your attention. I do believe that all the current structures permitted should be designated as conforming and nothing else. I request that this process, the process of preparing this plan, be opened up as fully as possible to the highest level of public participation and consideration. I haven't seen very much of this in the last 6 months, especially since the COVID has taken effect, and I'm not even have an awareness that we're, except for these random meetings, able to have much public participation. I'm also interested to know, or to be told or informed later, that if the Thurston draft plan turns out to differ from the state plan in any way or on any points, I would like the commission to identify what those places are for the public, because I know you're much more familiar with I am, so that the public can be aware of those, and the commission should explain how those variances are considered to benefit Thurston County. That'll be whatever you're recommending to the commission. Thanks so much again for letting me participate and comment tonight, and that concludes my remarks.
Frank Hudick.
Hi, Frank Hudick here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Frank Hudick. I live on Lawrence Lake. Fully support John Woodford and Barry Halverson's efforts. They've been huge, and very good communications with the various members of the Lake Management District out here. I serve on the steering committee with Barry. Made a prior comment, and I'd like to reiterate it, and I would like it to be addressed at the right level as we proceed or not with the SMP. My taxes have been going up $1,000 a year on average. I made this comment previously. Within the Washington State Board of Tax Appeal, WSBTA, there is language that says if there are restrictions on your property by the government, that's a legitimate reason to bring up your tax, to appeal your tax at the state level. So I'd like to have specific wording into the SMP, or correct the wording that's in the WSBTA proceedings to either allow that or not, because this year I appealed my taxes and it got on various bases, but specifically the basis of the restrictions of the current SMP, let alone the future SMP, they were not allowed. They were not allowed as a reason to appeal my taxes. Thank you.
Carol P.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight. Like many others, I support John Woodruff and would particularly like to support the comments made by Adam Fawcett. I live on Long Lake, kind of in the canal area, the channel that goes through. So like one of the other speakers who was talking, we are plagued with a lot of weeds and a lot of debris that gets washed up by the users of the lake, as well as by the weeds and things of that nature. And I got to tell you, it's not so pleasant being out here these days. But I would certainly like more information as to why these changes are being suggested. I would certainly much prefer that we were a conforming and grandfathered in 2008, approximately 12 years ago. I did a massive remodel on my home and was shocked to find, because of the Nisqually earthquake that occurred in 2001, there were all kinds of additional requirements and permits and things of this nature that were required in that remodel process that ended up costing me tens of thousands of dollars on my remodel. And I can only imagine what continued erosion of not being grandfathered in may result. So I'm very leery. I support the position of others that have brought this to your attention for several weeks and are asking for more information and for some exception that we would be grandfathered in as conforming instead of non-conforming. Thank you, and that concludes my comments.
Okay, can we get a last name, Carol?
Porter, P-O-R-T-E-R.
Okay, and just a reminder for everybody, please give us your name and address. Some people are saying what lake they live on. That's, I mean, as long as we know whereabouts, that's fine by me. So we have somebody calling in from a 516 phone number. If you're calling in from 516, there you go.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Steve Forte. We are new, my wife and I are new at the Lawrence Lake property, and I am concerned about some of the items that have been written about, and I would like to reinforce some of the items that Mr. Barry Harrison has listed, as well as some of the other speakers earlier. Specifically, you have an item that's at Thurston County, the SMP should be not more restrictive than the Department of Ecology requirement. And specifically, some time ago, I understand that a senior planner introduced the term of legally non-conforming to apply to structures legally established with designated buffers prior to the adoption of the SMP. Once a lot of complaints reached the planner, he said that it's just a name, why should it matter to you? And on a meeting in December of 2018, he displayed a panel entitled What's in the Name, and says whether they're called conforming, legally non-conforming, or any other name, structures in the buffer must follow the same rule for repair, extension, or replacement. Well, my take is that if a name does not matter, then let's call them legally conforming and not non-conforming. Another item is the remodel or reconstruction within existing building footprint must be exempt from substantial development permits. The staff also should acknowledge that there are different environmental conditions for marine waters, streams, river, and lakes. Of course, I'm concerned about a lake. So we should establish the freshwater lake requirement for decks, docks, pier floats, wharves, and bulkhead, and address the unique habitat characteristics associated with the shoreline residential use, as well as take in consideration everything that's already existing on the lake. Allow for deck boards, wood, and or composite space, the 1/4 inch apart for decks in the buffer, and on docks, wharfs over water. And these materials should be considered permeable, not impermeable. Finally, allow landward development within the buffer across the entire width of the existing residence and within that buffer. The Thurston County limits such to an additional 500 square feet, which is a totally arbitrary requirement. The Department of Ecology and Ms. Erica Sal has repeatedly stated that no such limit is required by the state. The 500 square limit was copied from Spokane SMP and should have no bearing in Thurston County. Thank you.
Mark Mininger.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Mark Meininger. I live on Pattison Lake. I'm a member of the Pattison Lake Association. I also, like many of the people I've heard tonight, support Mr. Halverson and Mr. Woodford. I have only one comment. It's already been mentioned tonight, but I wanted to stress it, that I firmly believe that the SMP should not be more restrictive than the Department of Ecology regulations and requirements. Again, I've heard that from a number of people tonight and hope that that rings through with you. Thanks for your time.
Okay, we've got a 360 call-in user.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Kim Nelson, and I live on Lawrence Lake on Lisa Lane. And I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to listen to our comments. I appreciate that. I concur with Barry Halverson and John Woodford, and I think the last, one of the last persons, Mr. Forte, and with Mr. Fawcett, who is speaking regarding Long Lake. I purchased a house on Lake Lawrence 5 years ago, and I'm also a volunteer part of the Lake Management Committee. And I pay a significant amount in taxes on the lake, and I believe in shoreline management as I'm a volunteer. However, I do not feel that imposing stricter guidelines with respect to the shoreline management is appropriate. And so my recommendation is that our guidelines should be no stricter than what the state requires. Thank you so much.
Okay, Tim Cass or Genevieve Cass.
Yeah, this is Timothy Cass, my wife Genevieve Cass. We're on Lawrence Lake, and really appreciate the work that Mr. Halverson and Mr. Woodford have done. Just wanted to reiterate these 12 points. They really hit the nail on the head. And I don't know if any of you live on a lake or a waterway, okay? But as other people have stated, the taxes are much higher. There is areas of land that cannot be used. And as far as the ecology portion goes, you know, we really need to get on par with what is the definition. Is it the county's version, or is it the state's version, or is it the federal version of ecology? And once that's determined, then you know you go with the higher version. Don't make your own up as you go along. The other thing is that when somebody puts out conforming, non-conforming, or legally non-conforming, there needs to be a clear-cut definition, okay? And so within that clear-cut definition, that should be made public. And everything that is done regarding the SMP with regards to any of the shoreline management, before it goes anywhere else, the transparency needs to be there. And people who are living on these areas need to be informed. It's up to them whether they choose or choose not to participate, but they need to be informed. And I don't know which methodology that information can take place, but those individuals, all of this information needs to get out there. Thank you.
Okay, Alan Bennett.
Hello, Alan Bennett. I live on Long Lake. I'm calling in, well, first of all, I would like to thank the commissioners for the opportunity to speak tonight. But I'm calling in and to support John Woodford's 12 points that are submitted. And rather than trying to go through all the ones that affect me the most, I cut it short and sweet to allow other speakers, but they are important and would like to see them addressed fully. Thank you.
Dave Ellison. Dave, if you can hear me, you're muted.
Scott, Dave Ellison spoke number 8 of public.
Oh, okay.
Now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, did you already speak?
Well, I did once, but I'm not computer savvy. And
Okay.
somehow I got cut off, and I don't like this computer stuff, but you know what I wanted to say.
Well, you've already had your discussion. We've got several other people to speak, so.
Oh, so I'm cut off.
Robert Jensen.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Robert Jensen. You're muted, Robert.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm glad to be able to say something. I've spoken before. I lived on Patterson Lake on the north end for 15 years. We now live in Panorama, but I have been an advocate for controlling the toxic algae blooms on Patterson and other lakes. And when I moved into Patterson Lake in 2004, there were no toxic algae blooms. And about 2008 or 9, they started coming. And now I got a notice today that there's advisory of many times above the state level of toxicity. And this is stunning to me, unfortunate, and it reiterates and it reinforces my comments, which have been that the Shoreline Management Master Program is perhaps the only tool to require regulation of septic systems on the lake for the betterment of the public and the elimination of these toxic algae blooms absent sewers. The sewers are not going to come for a while. Until we get sewers, we need to have more control over septic systems. Otherwise, we're going to lose our lakes. And so I've worked on the Shoreline Management Act. I was the primary attorney for the act when it was passed. I served for 12 years on the Shoreline Hearings Board. So I have an experience not only with shorelines, but with toxic algae blooms through my many years on sewage disposal. So phosphorus is the primary constituent to encourage toxic blue algae blooms. And they are occurring on the lakes because of lack of controls over the septic systems that are there. Most people control their septic systems, but many do not. And there's no requirement that they do so. Unless this is done through the Shoreline Management Act, it will not occur and the lakes will continue to deteriorate. I don't want that to happen. I support the comments of the other owners on the lake. I support reasonable shoreline management, but this is an area that we really need to fill a gap right away. It's getting unfortunate for all of us. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm on a railroad train right now, but I'm glad to be able to have this chance to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Bob Lanuette.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Bob Lanuette. I have 3 topics to talk to you about tonight. One, you've heard a number of people talk about non-conforming. And one speaker earlier said has been said by staff that it's really just a word or a term. So if this is the case, and you've heard so much, at least I think a lot of negative public feedback, why keep that word and why not change it? Now, as I'm sitting here waiting to be called on, I'm wondering, is there an agenda by the county for this term non-conforming that would later come back and have a negative impact on homeowners, where the county would want us to reset and become conforming? Now, that could be disastrous to some people that have decades-old homes. So I would like to hear some clarification from the staff to you on why keep this term non-conforming. Second, with the agenda modification today, where you're only going to review chapters 100 to 300, there is an opportunity for you to have staff engage the public more than they have in the past on previous chapters. And you've heard a lot of people talk today about really two topics, non-conforming and public participation. So there is an opportunity for the public via Zoom, via whatever you'd come up with, to provide feedback on the remaining chapters and the appendixes, and then for you to hear that you've gotten a lot of feedback so far, but that was, you could reduce that specifically to address chapters 400, 500, 600 in the appendixes. Finally, I would like to hear the staff report on where is this SMP more restrictive than the ecology rules and regulations in the WAC. I have not heard where it is, and I know it's been asked before, and I'm asking for that again. Thank you very much, and have a rest of the meeting.
Okay, we've got a call-in user 2.
Hi, this is Christy White from the Delphi Valley. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I wanted to echo this evening what Shelley Kneep, pardon me if I pronounced your name wrong, Shelley, about the ideas about SEPA being done ahead of time. I think that's a really important point that was raised about having all of this environmental information as much as possible, as early as possible. I know there are stakeholder groups and work groups, but I think that oftentimes that gets filtered down, and the Planning Commission may not, see all of the components that are so critical. As you know, I'm all about balance. And, how can we meet that middle ground that protects the resources and rural nature of our county, understanding that, yes, there is some development, of course, that's needed for growth, but keeping that environmental picture in mind. And I look at this evening, too. We have guest speakers. You have guest speakers this evening to talk about the asphalt plant. And it would seem to me, with the magnitude of the adjustments in the comprehensive plan, that those three items, master plan, shoreline master plan, asphalt, mining, that the same consideration to have at the Planning Commission meetings. Now, maybe I have missed this because I haven't been to every meeting, but that there are speakers that can do presentations in this public forum that most people can attend or have the possibility to attend an evening session, that speakers can demonstrate the issues. So again, looking at process are what my comments are about tonight, to continue to develop the ability for the commission to see both sides of an issue. Thanks for listening to me.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move into our work session on recycled asphalt.
Hi there. I guess I will introduce it. Jennifer Davis, Community Planning Manager. As you know, the Planning Commission wanted to hear more about Comprehensive Plan Amendment number 11 on our comp plan docket, recycled asphalt and removing a policy in the Nisqually sub-area plan that would prohibit asphalt recycling in the sub-area. So the Planning Commission invited guest speakers tonight representing both the sub-area and Lakeside Industries, who's located in that area. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to David Trout of the Nisqually Tribe and Nisqually River Council, and to Karen Deal and Bill Dempsey from Lakeside. And I think how this might work best is if we give each of our Nisqually River Council and Lakeside about 5 minutes each to say some words to the Planning Commission, and then maybe open it up for a Q&A between the Planning Commissioners and the speakers, if that sounds good to everyone. I see the chair nodding, so I'm going to go with that. And now it's a question of who wants to go first. So I see David Trout on my screen. If you're willing and ready, I would invite you to go ahead.
Okay, I can certainly do that, Jennifer. And thank you, members for the Planning Commission, for having us here tonight. I've been having internet issues, so I'm gonna have to turn off my video just to make sure my kids' game playing doesn't take me out here. So if we just go with the audio, that might work better. So my name is David Trout. I'm the Natural Resources Director for the Nisqually Indian Tribe. I've been in that position for 33 years. I was actually involved in the original sub-area planning process back in the 90s that resulted in the sub-area plan for the Nisqually. I'm also the chair of the Nisqually River Council, and I've been in that position for about 16 years now. And the Nisqually River Council, and you should take some pride in this as Thurston County residents, we are the oldest watershed council west of the Mississippi. We've been in place since 1987. We represent all the governments up and down the watershed, including Thurston County, and the cities of Lacey and Olympia are about to join our family, as well as Yelm and Edenville. It includes Lewis County, Pierce County, Thurston County, and then all the state and federal governments that have oversight in the Nisqually watershed and the Nisqually Indian Tribe, and then a Citizens Advisory Committee membership. And you've heard from some of our citizens this evening already about the recycled asphalt project. Phyllis and Howard, who spoke to you right off the bat, were from our Citizens Advisories Committee. And so one of the great things about the Nisqually River Council is that individual members can have positions different from the council. And the council tries to operate on a collaborative, consensus-based process. And I bring to you today an opinion from the council based on our consensus agenda. You have 2 letters in front of you dated from 2017 and 2019 that lay out some of our concerns, and I'll refer to those a little bit. We should also say that over the last 2 years or so, we've had Thurston County staff attending our Nisqually River Council meetings to give us regular updates on what was going on with the sub-area plan consideration, as well as this permit for a change in use and for Lakeside to bring recycled asphalt into the Nisqually Delta. Now, from the beginning, when this process got started, we were informed that they would be operating on parallel tracks, that the sub-area plan consideration will be moving at the same time as this project proponent's application. And we've just recently learned from Thurston County that that is no longer the case, that it sounds like the sub-area plan consideration is on hold until sometime in 2021, but that this application and request for a change in the sub-area plan is moving forward independent of that. And that causes the council and its members some concern. The sub-area plan was an inclusive, collaborative process that looked at a big regional effort and to try to balance the economy and natural resource issues, and I think was a really well thought out plan. And to reevaluate that now in today's time using adaptive management makes a lot of sense. And I think in doing that, we would learn a lot about the things that maybe didn't make sense then that make sense now, and some other issues that have come up that we didn't address then. But setting that aside and looking only at a particular project, you lose the ability to consider it as part of the whole. And so I'm a little concerned that the asphalt recycling project it's going to be difficult for you all to assess it in terms of an overall area when the planning process has been set aside. So to continue, we would certainly appreciate your help in moving county commissioners and county staff back to the original notion of moving these in parallel together so that we could have those discussions together and not think about them separately. And there's good reason for that. You may or may not be aware that there is also an application floating through the county for Holroyds to change their operations and go deep into the aquifer and remove and extract gravel down to 65 feet below the water table, exposing the groundwater sources for the city of Lacey and for a number of Nisqually tribal members and Valley residents to potential impacts resulting from contamination, whether that comes from recycled asphalt or simply from gravel operations. Opening up a big spot in the groundwater to surface contamination is problematic. And so through the planning process, the Nisqually River Council was going to advocate and will advocate at some point a prohibition against opening up surface connections to the groundwater. And so if that were in place now, that would provide some assurance that the impacts we're looking at relative to this proposal would be limited in scope. But because we don't know the outcome of the Holroyd proposal, when looked at in combination with the Lakeside proposal, causes us problems. And so having the planning process put on hold doesn't allow us to look at this in a comprehensive, cumulative impact sort of way. And that's problematic for us. So the Holroyd proposal, in my mind, and I've been working on this issue for a long time, of the two presents the greatest risk. There is currently an industrial site there with asphalt production and gravel extraction. And if they're allowed to open up a surface connection to the groundwater, it would cause tremendous harm to those that depend on that groundwater. And that's not even considering the addition of recycling asphalt into the equation. And so I'm going to speak to you now as if we're successful in establishing a prohibition, and if we're successful in not having the Holroyd project go forward. The council in our letters raised a couple of concerns for the recycled asphalt proposal, and one of which was that the work that was done by Herrera, that you all have probably reviewed by now, really indicated that there's a lack of credible field science, especially in this climate. A lot of the work they researched and were able to document was laboratory work, and some of it done in Europe under very different kind of climate conditions. And so the Nisqually River Council in our 2019 letter advocated for some science to be developed. And so we were hopeful in the intervening year that we would have had a chance to work with the county and the applicant to establish some studies to really get a sense of what's going on in our environment relative to recycled asphalt. And I recognize that the world has shifted dramatically since we sent that letter. And so our ability to do those kind of things has been greatly limited. And I appreciate that and appreciate the position that Lakeside finds themselves in as well relative to that. So, but to accommodate that, and I was thinking as I was coming up with my comments today, that the council is very interested in making sure that we have proper BMPs in place, that the issues that we're concerned about are protected. So at a minimum, the recycled asphalt needs to be covered. And there are other BMPs, industry standard BMPs that should be applied as well. And we suspect you have access to those. We also think that we should, if we're going to move forward with recycled asphalt in the Nisqually Valley, we should do it in a phased approach that would give us a chance to learn about what the potential impacts are before they become problematic, if they are problematic, and to allow expansion of the activity if they are not problematic. So some phasing of the amount of recycled asphalt allowed on site would allow us to study it over a period of time and then use the results to drive whether or not we increase or decrease the amount available on the site based on what we're learning from that particular site. We would really advocate strongly that the BMPs include some water quality monitoring by the applicant, that they're studying the potential leaching of the material and its movement off-site, into groundwater and surface waters, and that those findings should be reported to you all and to the county, and from my perspective, especially to the Nisqually River Council, on an annual basis. And so we should get together and hear a report from Lakeside on the findings of what's going on the site, and then together determine what additional BMPs may be needed, or if there's an opportunity to increase production, what that might look like as well. But we want to be included in that conversation as it goes forward. The Nisqually River Council finds ourselves in this really difficult position. If you've seen our stewardship plan, our Nisqually Watershed Stewardship Plan, which is online, it's based on a foundation of sustainability. And we've committed as an organization to work on and advocate for not only sustainable natural resources, which is in our wheelhouse, but also a vibrant economy and strong, healthy human communities as well. And so as part of that, we advocate using recycled materials as much as possible to reduce the impact of original production that occurs, whether it be timber or water or asphalt. And so recycled asphalt aligns well with our sustainability mission, but we just need to be careful that it doesn't push the burden too far onto the environmental side, where all the risk may cause significant and potentially irreparable damage to water resources. And certainly from my tribal perspective, with my tribal hat on, we have federal trust properties across the street, down gradient from the site. And if a surface connection is made to their groundwater source, we're seriously concerned that they will lose good, clean, healthy drinking water, which is just foundational to being a safe, happy homeowner in the Thurston County region. And so, in conclusion, we've learned a lot about recycled asphalt since the original sub-area plan. I was also involved in the lawsuit that enforced the prohibition against recycled asphalt back in the 90s that went to the state Supreme Court, and we ultimately prevailed. The Nisqually tribe prevailed. But this is now 2020, and science has shifted, and our ability to manage these kind of things has also shifted. And I think that if given the proper oversight and ability to phase in and monitor, and absolutely at all cost avoid an open connection to the groundwater adjacent to this site, then there's a possibility this can work in a way that makes sense for Lakeside and makes sense for the Nisqually River Council as well. And with that, those are my remarks, and I'd certainly be available for questions after Karen and her team is done.
Okay, well, I think it's time to turn it over to Bill or Karen, whoever wants to lead the charge for Lakeside. If you're muted, you'll need to unmute. There you go.
Unmuted myself. I thought you had to unmute me for me. Okay, well, good evening. My name is Karen Deal, and thank you all for having us here tonight to talk to you all. I am the Environmental and Land Use Director for Lakeside Industries. I have over 20 years experience working professionally in the field of environmental engineering. And I've been involved with this specific comprehensive plan amendment application since 2007. We do very much appreciate the county's willingness to review this amendment and look forward to continuing our work with the county and also with the tribe in this regard. Lakeside Industries is a family-owned company of locally managed regional divisions in the Pacific Northwest. We do operate 14 asphalt plants, which manufacture asphalt for construction of paved surfaces. In the Nisqually sub-area here particularly, we produce asphalt mix at our plant on Durgan Road. And our employees provide road paving construction services from that location as well. Lakeside does not conduct mining activities within the Nisqually sub-area. We are co-located with the Holroyd mine though. Lakeside is recognized nationally for our progressive safety and environmental programs, sustainable operations, and the quality products and services that we do provide. One key aspect of our environmental sustainability is recycling, and that's the recycling of reclaimed asphalt pavement, or RAP. Asphalt recycling is very, very common. It's a common sustainable practice that's encouraged nationwide and worldwide. The recycling process is very simple in how we do this. The asphalt roads are removed, resized into smaller, more manageable chunks, mixed with some virgin aggregate and asphalt cement. That's the glue that holds the aggregate and the wrap together. And then the construction crews take that new mix and pave the roads. There are over 3,500 asphalt plants in the United States. And to our knowledge, no other asphalt plant is prohibited from recycling asphalt. Most asphalt plant operations are located within critical aquifer recharge areas. That's where the gravel is. Therefore, in 2005, we submitted our first application to amend the Nisqually sub-area plan to remove the prohibition against asphalt recycling. The application in 2005 was rejected. In a letter from the director at the time, dated February 16, 2006, the reason for the rejection was, in quote, staff resources are not available in the current amendment cycle to address the project, end quote. Between 2005 and 2017, Lakeside resubmitted its application for a total of 5 times. The common reason for rejection or removal from the docket: limited staff resources. At the same time the county was rejecting Lakeside's proposal, the county was reapproving another contractor's request for a permit to allow for storage and recycling of wrap within the Nisqually sub-area, where it is currently prohibited. So after 10 years of continuous proactive communication and outreach, in May of 2017, our proposal was formally listed for serious consideration on the 2017-2018 official docket. Lakeside entered into a contract with Thurston County the following year to mitigate the staff resource concerns and help ensure timely review of the project proposal. The county, in order to expedite its review process, found it necessary to hire an external consulting firm, and that they produced that report, the Herrera report. Lakeside formally agreed to provide payment for the services provided by the county and the county's consultant. Since 2018, Lakeside has funded over $100,000 to this effort. Again, we are separate. The county is independent and the consultant is independent, and we do not have influence on that activity. We are just merely funding the ability to get this done. Throughout this process, Lakeside has provided the county with significant volumes of scientific information, both public and private entities support for our request to allow asphalt recycling in the Nisqually sub-area. It has been an education process, and it continues to be one, as it is very important. Asphalt recycling is cost efficient, a sustainable practice that extends natural resources and preserves landfill space. The alternative to recycling asphalt is to dump it in the ground. Governmental, educational, and private research entities have thoroughly evaluated the potential impacts associated with wrap. Most of that effort occurred since the Nisqually sub-area plan was approved in 1992. The research resulted in a body of technical information and scientific evidence supporting the fact that wrap is inert. It is defined as inert in the state of Washington and poses no threat to water quality, particularly when considering dilution, infiltration, and stormwater treatment. We are hopeful that the county will soon finalize approval of our proposal based on the overwhelming scientific evidence that wrap is environmentally beneficial for reuse. And while the scientific evidence and real-world evaluation has shown no defined groundwater impacts from decades of outdoor storage of wrap and usage across the country, Lakeside is willing to eliminate any lingering water quality concerns by covering wrap stored on our site. Lakeside's plant on Durgan Road is a state-of-the-art facility. It does have a sophisticated engineered stormwater system that has functioned without issue since it was opened up in 2008. All stormwater on site stays within the plant's boundaries and does not enter the nearby Holroyd mine. Lakeside Industries stormwater is collected, treated, and infiltrated in accordance with Department of Ecology guidelines. To ensure compliance, groundwater has regularly been monitored by a qualified third party since 2007 with no issues. Groundwater monitoring shows that the plant stormwater system has operated as designed without issue, even during flooding events. The reports are submitted to the county on a regular basis. Therefore, we want to hear, I really want to be clear right up front that Lakeside and our application is not part of the Holroyd mine expansion permit process, that it is a separate process under separate review currently. We recognize that the Nisqually sub-area is unique and a beautiful area. And for this reason, we have agreed to cover any wrap piles on site, which would prevent stormwater from contacting the piles and eliminating any concerns associated with water runoff from wrap. Furthermore, upon completion of this first step of amending the Nisqually sub-area plan, and that's the first step, Lakeside is absolutely committed to working with the county and the Nisqually tribe during the next permitting phase to develop adaptive management principles and conduct additional groundwater monitoring as it pertains to storage on site. So we're asking that you approve that option 2, which allows recycling of asphalt in the Nisqually sub-area and relies on county permitting staff to determine the appropriate mitigation measures to avoid impacts to water quality. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time to speak here and look forward to the questions you may have.
Time for questions. I don't know if Bill, you wanted to say a word or.
Yes, I'd like to say a quick word. I'm Bill Dempsey. I worked in the asphalt industry for 42 years, and I'm currently the production manager at Lakeside. And I agree with Phyllis and David. When RAP was excluded around 30 years ago, it was probably a good thing. RAP was just coming on the scene, and it was kind of new and kind of scary, and there weren't a lot of good actors back then, and it actually made the plants pollute a little more. And so, and the learning curve took a little while, but just like cars, if our cars still polluted like they did in the 50s, we wouldn't be able to breathe in the cities. But the cars are now cleaner, and our airs, they don't pollute like they did. And so the asphalt industry has come a long ways also. 30 years later, we're a cleaner and environmentally conscious industry. And I agreed with Howard Glastetter about covering the wrap pile so that it takes the environment out of the equation. We have improved immensely in the last 30 years, and the aquifer won't be impacted due to our controls and the covering of the wrap. And I would once again welcome any and all of you to come out and take a tour of our facility and see how great we are.
Okay, I'll just open it up to the planning commissioners to ask questions of our guest speakers. It's kind of your show.
Hi, this is Eric Casino. I was hoping I could ask David Trout a question. It seems to me that your biggest concern really is about Holroyd and their new deep mining aspects of this, and you might even concede that the environmental risk of recycling asphalt is actually nominal. Would that be a correct characterization?
I think for the most part, yes. I think that we still are curious about what additional science may tell us. I appreciate that Karen and Lakeside folks, Bill, are willing to cover, and I think that'll go a long way towards solving any kind of environmental issues. But still, there's going to be times when, for whatever reason, things aren't covered, and this will give us an opportunity to learn more about what does come off of those sites in our current climate. You are correct, though. Whether the asphalt recycling goes forward or not, having an open pit connection to the groundwater of the region is a terrible idea. And if you were to combine that with asphalt production and asphalt recycling, just the basic ability to be there and the stuff that comes off vehicles, moving stuff around with an open water connection to the groundwater creates a massive problem. So in short, yes, I think that is the bigger of the issues.
Would you characterize recycling asphalt as more potentially hazardous than just making asphalt? Is one significantly more problematic than the other?
So you're getting a little bit beyond my expertise, but from my understanding, if it were to be uncovered, it could potentially be on site for a fair amount of time and could present environmental risks that are not associated with original asphalt production. But with the willingness and the BMPs to cover, I think that mitigates that issue pretty extensively. And I want to add that Lakeside has been in the Nisqually watershed for a number of years now and has been a good partner and a good player in the watershed and has built up a certain level of trust with those of us that are familiar with their operation. But as Ronald Reagan liked to say, trust yet verify. So this is all about verifying that the risks aren't real and that at the end of the day, our tribal members aren't going to be suffering groundwater contamination. And so I am willing to work with Lakeside on this. I think that they again have been good partners as long as we're all pointing in the right direction and we don't have an open connection to the groundwater right there next to it.
Karen, I have a question for you. I understand why asphalt plants are in CARES, mainly because that's where the gravel is. It makes sense that you would have an asphalt plant where so you're not shipping gravel somewhere just to ship it back. And then you said that you folks operate 14 other facilities. And at one point you said that you're doing water testing at the Durgeon Road facility and it always comes up good. How's your water testing been at the other facilities that you operate?
Well, actually, we don't have to test groundwater at all of the facilities that we operate. This is one of the locations where we do have to test groundwater on a regular basis. I'm trying to think back on some areas. A lot of the testing, when we've had to do groundwater testing, it's really associated with some of the mining operations that we have had other places, but not associated with our asphalt plant operations. This is the one that we have to do groundwater monitoring on a regular basis, and that's it.
Do you guys have an environmental code of practice that's separate than your listed BMPs?
Environmental code of practice separate from our listed BMPs. Now I want to clarify some of these definitions of BMPs that are being talked about here. The ones that have been referred to by the county in the presentation of RAP reference back to a document that was produced by the National Asphalt Pavement Association on BMPs for RAP, best management practices for reprocessing or recycling RAP. And those BMPs are really designed around, not directly associated with prevention or mitigation of water quality impacts. Those BMPs are designed around what's the best practice to ensure that your plant is operating as efficiently as it can. How are you, mitigating the amount of water that you have to drive off of RAP by keeping it covered? Has no association at all in that list and description of BMPs as it relates to water quality protection or any concerns there. So the BMPs we incorporate from an environmental standpoint are consistent with the BMPs that are listed by the Department of Ecology and the Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington. Those best management practices include a range of different principles or practices that exist, whether it's having, you have spill response procedures, you have defined positions responsible for different activities associated with inspection and monitoring for groundwater, air quality, or what have you, in groundwater in this case. We have BMPs or source control BMPs. So things, storing materials in secondary containment, those type of BMPs. And then we have treatment control BMPs, treatment BMPs. That includes lined detention ponds, oil water separators, those sorts of best management practices to ensure that your final discharge of that stormwater that's collected and contained on site is clean and meets the state standards for groundwater and surface water discharge. We have to meet both those standards. Not all of our sites discharge to surface water directly after treatment. Some of our sites do. This one at Durgan Road in particular discharges to groundwater only after it goes through a series of treatments. So does that help answer that question for you?
Yeah. It does want me to change the subject a little bit, and maybe Bill's probably the guy to ask this one instead of you, because it's more of a business question. And Bill, I know that since this is, I'm just hoping for a thumbnail number here, and I'm nothing going to hold you to it or expecting this to be a formal quote or anything. But I know that last year, Thurston County as a business entity consumed about $1.9 million worth of asphalt. And I imagine a lot of that was from your facility or other lakeside facilities. If you were to sell approximately $2 million worth of asphalt, but you were able to use RAP in the production of the asphalt that the county was consuming, because I think you can add up to 20% RAP to a batch of road material. You know, just thumbnailing it, how much money would that save the county?
Well, it saves about $5 a ton. Okay, so that at the current price down there is probably saves about 8% on the price we sell it for. What we're looking for though is to extend resources, and as you know, the reason Holroyd wants to go in the ground is because they're worried about running out of gravel. If we can put 20% recycled asphalt into our mix, it extends the life of their gravel pit by 20%.
No, I like that. You know, recycling makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, but you know, if we're going to be saving 8% or have the potential to save 8% roughly, that's 8% less economic activity that we have to do to destroy the environment in other areas.
Correct.
Do you, and maybe this would be better answered by David Trout or maybe Karen, has anybody done any kind of analysis on the environmental impacts of not recycling by having to truck this material and dumping it somewhere or throwing it, I don't know, does it go to the Thurston County landfill, or do you guys have a big hole somewhere else that you pump it into? Or by not using this stuff, that has a real environmental impact too, I would assume.
Karen, I would defer to you on that one.
I can actually answer that. There's a lot, we start getting buried in piles of asphalt in different areas, and you can look around in some areas close by and they've got huge stockpiles of recycled asphalt that hasn't been recycled yet. So it's just ground up asphalt or torn up asphalt. So it either goes to a landfill, which we all know is limited in space, or it sits on someone's property. And Karen, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I guess I can further answer that question. As far as landfilling goes, it could go to your municipal landfill, or it can go to an inert waste landfill according to Washington State Code. But obviously that's not an ideal location for it to be when it is clearly a recyclable material. So when we do recycle asphalt, there has been a little bit of analysis done, and I can't, don't quote me on the numbers, and I've actually done some calculations in the past. It's been a couple of years, but there is a reduction in CO2 emissions when you incorporate RAP into new mix. So by recycling, there is an overall reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
And also, Eric, there's 80 million tons of recycled asphalt produced in the US. I mean, it's recycled through asphalt plants, 80 million tons of asphalt. And so that saves a lot of natural resources.
I just want to circle back to David Trout one more time on the Nisqually River Council's concerns or largest concerns on this. And if you could, it seems like your largest concerns really are these rat piles sitting there exposed to the weather, and that runoff getting into the groundwater would be there. How big of a risk do you think these rat piles would be if they are covered one way or another? And do you have a idea on if one cover is better than another? I mean, I'm sure that a hard roof cover is probably better than a tarp, but does that matter that much either?
So I guess I need to preface the answer by saying there's different levels of impact depending on the site conditions. And so if asphalt recycling is occurring under the current conditions where there's not a connection to the groundwater, then the risks are much, much lower than if it existed. I think a significant portion of the risk associated with asphalt recycling potentially is when water meets asphalt. And that can be prevented. And you've heard the applicant say they're willing to take steps to prevent that. So I think that will mitigate significantly the amount of risk associated. And let me just add that at this point, that if the Planning Commission were to consider a proposal for the removal of the prohibition of RAP to forward on to the county commissioners, then we feel that you should condition that removal with further protections of groundwater, surface water resources by prohibiting the creation of surface water connection to the groundwater. That would provide us all with a fair amount of certainty and security that the risk can be managed in a way to minimize impacts to the resources we care about.
And Mr. Trout, at what depth would that be at that particular location?
I'm sorry, but depth of?
The groundwater.
The gravel?
Yeah. You're talking about, if it goes 65 feet, it's below groundwater level. So what is the level of groundwater at that location?
You know, I'd like to tell you a number, but I don't have it offhand. I know that it's a very shallow aquifer that's also connected to the Nisqually River. And we have wells in our hatchery upstream and across from the site, and we find water at 20 feet. So I suspect that they would also find groundwater at 20 feet or so.
Thank you.
I'm done with my questions. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Sorry we held you a little later than we thought we were going to.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
thank you very
I
much.
had just said that I had a question for David and Karen. And that is, what do you think about a plasphalt instead of, getting other ways? And plasphalt has been used, I think, up in Seattle and other places, and we have a lot of experience from that. And it has a longer, it does not change. It has a longer lifetime if you want for roads and things. So this, and now that China is not taking our extra plastic, our recycled plastic, and it seems like this is a good time to think about using plasphalt instead of asphalt. And I don't know if anybody has
Donna, I'd like to address that if I could.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
When you start putting stuff into asphalt, you got to make sure you're not building a linear landfill. And so there's a lot of studies right now on putting plastics into asphalt, and so far they're pretty good. There's been some failures depending on the types of plastic. There's some plastics that recycle very easily and some that don't. And so it wouldn't be like it would handle all the plastics, but so far the tests they're doing and the academia that's studying it is showing some promising results. But I'm not sure we're there yet, but maybe in 5 years we'll be coming to the council and asking to let us put plastic into our asphalt.
Well, and I can also answer that question a little bit as well, because I'm actually on a plastics and asphalt task force with the National Association, and I represent interest in ensuring that we don't create environmental impacts from the usage of it. So there's one side of the industry looking at whether or not this can be a quality product by incorporating asphalt into it and have the life that we want to provide the public with, and a quality paved road. And then the other side is what does that mean for our operations and our ability to ensure and continue with the good track record we have with environmental compliance and not having an impact to groundwater and air emissions. So that there's a lot that goes into that type of an analysis. So as far as it being within the next 5 years or 10 years or not, it's a big question about where that's going to lead in the future. And there's lots of research being done in it, and it's not something that we're going to be able to propose or be proposing anytime here soon. But it is something that is being looked at.
Yeah, and there are roads that are made from that recycled plastic right now in the United States. And also in Europe, there are even more. So it's not just something that's, you have to still try to make something else. It's already made, and these roads don't need as much potholes and things like that. They don't need, it's actually stronger than asphalt. So I can send you some number of papers on that. Yeah, and it's something to think about.
So, Mr. Chair, this may be unusual, but it seems like you're adept at running unusual meetings, witnessing the early part of this meeting. I have a question for Karen and Bill, and we talked about the council's insistence on having strong monitoring and adaptive management in play. And I think I heard a response to that, but I wouldn't mind if you wouldn't, as I go to have my dinner, to repeat what your commitment was there so I can go away happy.
Okay, I'll repeat it. Basically, what I said after we complete this first step of amending the Nisqually sub-area plan, because I see that this is the first step in being allowed to even recycle, then the next phase of this is that permitting phase that we will have to go through in order to start recycling RAP at the Durgan Road location. And during that phase, we're committed to working with you and with the county on developing those adaptive management principles and a groundwater monitoring plan that is deemed appropriate as it pertains to storage of RAP on site.
Thank you, Karen. That was a perfect answer. Thank you.
Can you turn it off?
You're welcome.
Because it's hot down there.
I'm sorry to interrupt this one more time, but if you guys did, if the county did go forward with this rezone with the condition that the RAP pile has to be covered, how are you planning to cover it? Are you going to do tarps? Are you going to build a lean-to, and how big would it be?
That we would cover it. You've seen those big tarp buildings that cover, and they're very good structures. We've got a bunch of them.
Like the hay barns?
Like hay barns, yeah, with the trusses, the arch trusses, and it would probably be 150 by 100. And I mean, but those things have come a long way. They even withstand the winds down in Aberdeen. We've got a plant down on the water down there, and the tarp facilities are very structurally sound, and we've had them for 20 years now, and the same tarp still on them.
And you would tie that roof line into your stormwater as well?
Correct.
Yeah, and we would be going through a building permit application process for review and make sure that that structure is appropriately permitted.
Okay, I was more worried or I'm more concerned about, is this tarp actually going to be laying on top of the rat pile, or is the rat pile going to go into some kind of building? And it sounds like it's going into kind of a formal structure, not just a blue tarp from Harbor Freight sitting on top of it.
Yeah, we've tried that before. It doesn't work.
Okay, any other questions? All right, once again, thank you, everybody. So the next thing on our agenda, staff is asking us to set a public hearing on this issue. So if anybody's interested in doing that, they're asking for a public hearing on October 7th.
I move that we set a public hearing on, what did you say, September? No.
October 7th.
October 7th at 7 p.m. to hear the asphalt recycled, or I guess docket CPA 11 for recycled asphalt.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of setting a public hearing for 7 o'clock on October 7th, 2020 for comprehensive plan docket number CPA 11, recycled asphalt production, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And we're on to the comprehensive plan update. Jennifer again.
Yeah, I'm actually going to turn it back over. I'm going to turn it over to Maya Teeple, who's actually taking some time out of her vacation to be leading you through your discussion of the continuing items of the 2020 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. So go for it, Maya.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Good evening, Commissioners. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner with Community Planning. I have a short PowerPoint prepared for tonight that I'll be going over briefly, but this is a follow-up from the August 19th public hearing that we had, and that was on the 2020 Comprehensive Plan update that covered mineral lands, long-term forestry, parks, and the health chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This is new. Odd. I'm having issues figuring out how to do this for some reason. Sure. Well, I may have to do this without the PowerPoint because when I go to click share screen, I'm not getting that application available to me. So,
Maya, do you want me to try? I have the PDF up on my screen. I can try it.
Could you go ahead and try that and see if you're able to get it?
Let me try. Do we see that?
Yes, that works.
Oh, so we'll just use the PDF because that's what I got going on here.
So yeah, as I mentioned, this is a follow-up from August 19th public hearing, and I sent over a pretty bulky memorandum to the Planning Commission, a packet with this work session just to go over what was included in that packet. The memorandum to the Planning Commission, the first couple of pages, was a summary of the public comment that was received for the public hearing. It included staff recommendations on the options that are before the Planning Commission and also a draft motion for the Planning Commission. There were 4 attachments to that packet. The first attachment was a summary of the options before the Planning Commission. Second attachment was some maps of long-term forestry parcels just for reference. The third attachment was the memorandum to the board from 2018 that covers the history of the 1,000-foot separation distance. And then the fourth attachment was all of the public comments that were received. So going over that, the public comment that we received, I mentioned this in the packet and also at the public hearing. We did receive 242 comments before the start of that public comment period with the Planning Commission. And most of those comments were related to mineral lands. All but one were on mineral lands. And then the remaining one was on parks. So there's an overview of what topics those comments touched on in that packet. For the public hearing comment period, we received 8 oral comments at the public hearing on August 19th, and then 52 written comments. So of those written comments, 1 comment was on forestry, 1 comment was a logistical concern, 10 comments were on parks that were opposing the Spooner Farms Park proposal, which is a City of Olympia project. That's not part of the comprehensive plan. Staff did respond to all of those comments noting such. And then 40 of the comments that we received were on mineral lands. So Jennifer, if you could change the slide. So the mineral lands topics ranged quite substantially. I'll talk about, this is a bulky slide, and this covers everything that we received, but I'll talk about the comments that we received on the topics that we had that we received the most comments on. So 24 comments that were received were in support of option A1, which is to not co-designate long-term agriculture and mineral resource lands. That was the topic that we received the most public comment on. Over half of the comments were on that. And then 13 comments were in support of maintaining the 1,000-foot separation distance. So we're not removing the 1,000-foot from the designation criteria, but there are a few options before the Planning Commission that consider some flexibility to that. And then there was a variety of options that supported different options that are before the Planning Commission. So some supported option D1, some supported option D3. That was relatively consistent in amount across the comments we received in support of those. I do want to note that we had 2 comments that suggested some code changes to the existing language that was included in the draft. So one of the comments requested that under one of the options, which is option D3, they requested that the language be changed to, the current language states that mining operations can occur within 1,000 foot of a park if the operator that's applying for that expansion donated the park. And we did receive a comment that suggests to change that language to any operator can apply if the park was donated. And some testimony was given on that at the last meeting that current language could cause some unfair advantage to certain operators by requiring the same operator that donated the park to be able to expand and no one else. And then the second comment we received requesting a code change was to require that the barriers be in place at the time of adoption. So there's currently code language that says, under option D3 again, that says a mine can expand up to an existing barrier, or a new mine can occur up to an existing barrier like a road, an industrial use, or a railroad. And one of the comments we received requests that the barriers be in place at the time that the code language is adopted. So I just wanted to note those 2 comments that we received as well. So next slide. So I'm going to touch on the 1,000 foot since this is one of the most controversial issues that is discussed among the public with mineral land specifically. And you've heard a lot about it and a lot of different sides about this topic. So going back, the history goes back to 1993. And in 1993, the county adopted the mineral lands designation criteria in Chapter 3 of the Comprehensive Plan. The 1,000-foot separation distance from urban growth areas was included in that original designation criteria. So there were some findings in the resolution that state that the basis for this criteria is to minimize potential conflict with rural and residential lands while still meeting the criteria to designate. It also considered other issues such as groundwater protection, hazards from gravel trucks, and compatibility with surrounding residential uses. So that was the findings in the resolution for that 1993 adoption of that criteria. Fast forward, in September of 2010, the 1,000-foot separation distance for parks was also adopted. So previously parks had been protected just the park site, but in 2010 that changed to also include that 1,000-foot separation distance from parks in the designation criteria. And that decision was made after very long discussions. Those discussions occurred from 2003 to 2010, and it was a lot of work. So there was a mineral lands task force that was formed in 2003, and they met 11 times. This was one of many criteria that they discussed. And there were several planning commission work sessions, over 11. There was an open house, and then the board held 3 briefs before this specific criteria was adopted. So the findings in the resolution for the 1,000-foot related to parks state that the 1,000-foot has been historically used in Thurston County to separate mineral lands from residential uses and other incompatible uses. Furthermore, looking at archived documents, the Mineral Lands Task Force recommended in 2005 that public parks and preserves be separated from mineral lands by a distance of 1,000 feet. Some of the public comment that you've heard says that it was just a factor of who was in attendance at that meeting. I went ahead and looked back at the record of that report that was supplied, and it says there were 9 votes that were in favor of adding that 1,000-foot to parks, and there were 3 votes that supported the concept but felt it was excessive and that the distance should be a site-specific issue. So even back in 2005, we're hearing the same conversation that we're hearing today. Furthermore, the Planning Commission recommended that at that time, they recommended including the 1,000-foot in the parks as a designation criteria. So I did go try to check how many folks were on the task force for mineral lands. I found that there were 13 listed in that report, but it doesn't note if there were anybody present or absent. So I'm not sure if the 9-3 was a factor of people being absent. I can't determine that from what was available in the record. So that's my summary on the 1,000-foot separation distance, but I do want to pause and check in and see if anyone has questions on this specifically before I go forward. Hearing none. Jennifer, could you send me the next slide? So now I'd like to open it up to the Planning Commission about questions that they have on any public comment that they had, any sort of discussion that they'd like to have on any of the comprehensive plan topics. We do have a request for a recommendation at this meeting, but this is really the opportunity to ask any questions that you have or propose changes to the current amendments.
Jennifer, the option A1 in code designating. So as I understand it, it's that you're co-designating the agriculture with mining, and so that the mines could mine in that agricultural area. But from our discussions in the past, typically the soils in the two are different. But it would give, I think Scott brought up the point where if you had a section of your farm that wasn't very good for farming, but was good for mining, that you could at least make some money off that property by by subletting it to the mines. Is that, but by co-designated, now you've expanded the total number of acres available for mining across the county significantly. So it's kind of a fictitious number, right?
So I'm just going to touch on that. Option A1 is to not co-designate. So in option A1, but in option A2, yes, you're correct. The areas where there is gravel that overlays with long-term agriculture would be both, and both would apply. And we have heard the comment that, you know, it wouldn't be mined unless the resource was there, and it may or may not be viable ag land, but there hasn't been you know, there hasn't been concrete site-specific review to analyze that. We did have South Sound Community Farm Land Trust, and they took the time to go back and look at some of the overlaid areas. And most of those areas where mineral lands is overlaid with agricultural lands is on the edges of the agricultural lands that are designated. So if they are both, if there is co-designation, then the landowner would have the option, or they could lease it potentially to an operator.
So what's the downside of co-designating?
There is concern on the agricultural community that those lands cannot be restored fully to their agricultural use as they were before. And we have added in language into the code that would require certain soil composition and characteristics to be looked at before mining occurs, and for that to be taken into consideration in reclamation. So there is language in there to try and mitigate those concerns, but that is by and large the big concern from the community, is that this would reduce the amount of long-term agricultural land, and it could potentially result in these lands not being returned to their fully capable agricultural use.
Maya, would you remind me, how many acres are we talking about of long-term ag land?
It's around 2,000 acres that would be co-designated. And just for reference, the amount of long-term agriculture that is designated in the county right now is 15,000, around there. So it's a good chunk of the current long-term agricultural lands. The amount of mineral lands that are proposed for designation is around 140,000. So it would be a small portion additional to mineral lands.
Thanks.
Scott, you want to jump in here and give us any of your insight from your background?
Sure. So again, my thoughts on this were that, number one, you've got mostly large parcels in long-term ag. And if 50% of that parcel is covered by ag, by the prime soils, then that parcel can be designated as long-term ag. Keep in mind, there are good soils out there that just don't meet the definition of prime soils. So, and there's parcels that are smaller or away from other groups, because one of the things that Thurston County did was group long-term ag into I think blocks of 320 acres, unless it's within a certain distance. And the example that I think of specifically is, I mean, really it's a moot point because it's already mined, but the property directly next door to my parents' house has a parcel that's designated as long-term ag, but there's a portion of it, most of it's in the river bottom. There's a portion of it that runs up a hill. And I mean, I think they started mining that before GMA. So that's why it's part of the reason it's a moot point, but they mined out, and they've mined from basically from where the ground rises to where it's less desirable ag land out towards what is the more desirable mineral resource land. And like I said, that's an example of where this would be a, you know, where this would fit in. But it's, like I said, it's already been mined. So this particular piece of property isn't going to be affected by that.
When a mining company gets a permit to build a mine, don't they at the same time have to establish a restoration plan and exactly what it would be? So from a permitting standpoint, that would all be set before they start digging?
That's correct. So when an operator wants to come in and do a mine on a property, they need to develop a reclamation plan, and that is required as part of the permitting process. So the county requires that before they issue the permit to mine. However, the reclamation plan is actually managed by DNR. So DNR will work with the county to ensure that the land use that's cited in the reclamation plan is appropriate. And then we will sign off on the permit once that reclamation plan is all processed and permitted as well. So it's a joint effort, it's joint authority. So yeah.
Maya, do all those reclamation plans include a bond?
I believe that they include a bond. I don't know the details off the top of my head, but DNR does have some of that information on their website where they require the bond up front for the reclamation plans now. I think there might be a threshold on size or amount or acreage, but typically they do have a bond required. So,
Maya, are there any examples of failed reclamation? Has it been working?
So if you go around the county now, you will see some mine pits that are abandoned. Occasionally you'll drive and you'll find them. And those date back to before reclamation plans were required under GMA. So now, today, we do require reclamation plans under the Growth Management Act and under state law, and all operators must have one in order to mine. So DNR does enforce that, and I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's working pretty well because I haven't been around long enough to see it be enforced through the full life of these mines, but it is being enforced, and it is a change from what was done in the past. So I think there is this stigma that we see these vacant pits and they get abandoned, but state law has changed. So we see these things change over time with it. Any other discussion on any of the items that were talked about at the public hearing last meeting? Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, Jennifer. So at the Planning Commission's discretion, if the Planning Commission feels comfortable tonight, we do have draft language for a motion. It's pretty lengthy. I apologize for that. And we are asking that the Planning Commission include which options they want to recommend. So an option for A, C, D, E, and F. We can include a minority opinion if there are secondary options. And related to long-term forestry, there are specific parcels. So if there is a recommendation to change the land use and zoning of any of the parcels, we'd ask to specify which ones.
I'll make a motion. So I guess I read this, huh?
Doug, I'm gonna make a suggestion first.
Okay.
I'm gonna suggest that we go through these options and make a decision, and then we can do a motion on all of them so we know ahead of time what our recommendation is gonna be.
I'm for that. So you want a motion for the options A first?
Yeah, I'd say let's start with a motion for option A.
Okay, I'm gonna go counter to the recommendation and move that we adopt option A2 for code designation.
I'd second that motion.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of recommending option A2, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, option C.
I'll move that we move forward with option C1.
Somebody want to second that? Okay,
I'll second it. I'm sorry, my sound was up.
okay. So, been moved and seconded to move forward with option C1. Any discussion?
I think we should go with the RCW distance of 500 feet, but I don't have a super strong opinion on it either. I think keeping Thurston County Code and Washington law the same is fine, but I don't have a strong opinion.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of option C1, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Option D.
I'll move that we move ahead with option D3.
Is there a second?
I would second the motion to move forward with option D3.
Okay. Any discussion?
Just a question, I guess, about that, or when the park was donated by the same operator. Is that something that ought to be in there?
So,
I would like
that's part of our discussion. It was recommended that we change that to an operator.
I would recommend that we change it to an operator and remove the same operator language.
Was that a motion? Amend?
Motion to amend option D3 from same mining operator to a mining operator.
And I'll second that.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor of amending option D3 to state that a park was donated by a operator or an operator instead of by the same operator, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Any discussion on option D3 as amended? Okay, all those in favor of approving option D3 as amended, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Let's go with option E.
I'd move forward with option E3.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I'm gonna have to look up E3 real quick because
Can I I have it in front of me. Would
Okay.
you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Code language in 2030B would consider a whole parcel designated at the site level and eligible to apply for a permit only when the entire parcel is mapped as designated. Is that the option that you wish to move forward?
You're right. I probably wouldn't want that one.
So if you're in a large parcel, well, yeah, no, I'm not. Why wouldn't you want to be able to mine on? You got a large parcel and part of it was mineral.
I don't want every square foot of the parcel to have to be designated for them to do any mining on the parcel because of that. You know, if it's a 40-acre parcel and there's only mineral lands down on one corner of it and there's a mine already down there, I wouldn't want that to stop them from being able to continue that mine just because not all 40 acres is in it.
So option E3 requires the whole parcel to be designated in order to apply for a permit. Option E2 requires any amount to be designated in order to apply for a permit. And option E1 has a double threshold. It must be a 1/4 acre and at least 5% in order to apply for a permit.
I table my motion for option E3 and then move to adopt option E2.
Second.
Okay. Option E2 has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of recommending option E2, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Option F. And before we get this, I looked through again today. I didn't see any comments from the landowners. Did we get any from any of the parcel owners considered for option F?
We did not receive any formal public comment during the comment period or in oral testimony, but there were some previous conversations that were informal with the landowners. Some were in support and others were not. So they were notified during the public hearing that this was being considered. So.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion?
I'd move to adopt option F2 in our recommendation, including, and that would include all parcels.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I second.
Okay, any discussion? I'm looking for my map here. So, I mean, I know we did this a while ago. I don't remember exactly why these were being considered for removal. Do you have anything, Maya?
Yeah, so staff conducted a high-level aerial review of the aerial imagery of the fringe parcels for the long-term forestry area and looked at which parcels had development on them or were lacking forestry timber. And then we compared that with the current designation criteria. And these were the only 7 parcels that were identified because they either had a house on the property or some of them have very minimal tree coverage on the property. And we compared that with the designation criteria and went through that. So that is how these 7 came to be. But in a review of the whole long-term forestry block, these were the only 7 that were identified.
So I guess I'll say I don't have strong opinions about F and G or D. But remember, one of the directives when we're doing this is sensible boundaries. And I think pulling these I think pulling A, C, and E, especially E, kind of gets away from our nice clean boundaries on most of this.
I want to think that when we had this presentation earlier, not all 7 of the people responded, but I want to think that 4 of the people responded. 3 of them wanted to do it, and the one that didn't want to do it was Parcel A, Kruger. But the Kruger property, even if it was taken out of long-term forestry, wouldn't change anything on that parcel, but it would affect the Jefferson Davis Living Trust if they had to go along with it, and they wouldn't be able to come out of it. So it at the time, to me, and this is just me probably reading in more than I should, it almost sounded like the Krugers were worried that the Jefferson Davis Living Trust was going to, if it came out of long-term forestry, do some more development, and they didn't want, and Kruger didn't want the Jefferson Davis Trust to do that development. And that kind of seemed like that doesn't seem like a good enough reason not to let them come out of long-term forestry, is because you don't want your neighbors to do something.
Okay, does anybody else have anything that they would like to add? Okay, we have a motion to recommend option F2 and recommend approval of de-designation from long-term forestry for all of the parcels under consideration. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. I only heard one aye, so is there, who else? I think Eric's in favor.
I'm on aye.
Okay.
I was muted.
Okay. Ed?
Aye.
Okay. Donna? Sorry, I'm trying to look here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Jim?
Aye.
Okay, that's 5, so motion carries. So now, if somebody would like to make a motion with all of our recommendations included, now that we know them, I would accept that motion.
I need to say the whole thing, or can I just say as noted and I'll move it?
Let's actually do it official since we've got the wording right in front of us.
Planning Commission moves forward a recommendation of approval to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners of amendments to comprehensive plan. Do you need the whole thing read?
Yes.
Plan chapters 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 11, appendices C and D, and maps L1, future lands use map N1, long-term forestry and agricultural, and map N2. designated mineral lands, and to recommend approval of amendments to Chapter 17.20, Chapter 18.04, Chapters 20.03, Chapter 20.30B, Chapter 20.54, and Chapter 20.60 of the Thurston County Code. The Planning Commission recommends approval of these amendments as presented in option as we just denoted, which are options A2, C1, D3 as amended, E2, and F2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in, or I guess, any more discussion? Okay. All those in favor of recommending the comp plan amendments as we have discussed tonight, A2, C1, D3, E2, and F2, including all of the parcels, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries, and that moves us on to Shoreline Master Plan.
I am going to start off because I wanted to say that I really appreciate the public comment that we received tonight, continue to receive at every meeting just about on the Shoreline Master Program. I can sense the growing impatience on the part of the public to see what's next, to see the next draft, to have the open house materials released. I wanted to just remind anyone, I don't know if anyone out there is still listening, but as we've briefed this Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, you know, staff is working really hard to put together all of those public outreach materials for this next big push of public participation. So a virtual open house, direct postcard mailing, fact sheets, interactive map online. We can't do that or get there until we land on the public hearing draft from the Planning Commission that you want to put forward. And so what we're doing is continuing to collect in all of this public comment. It is being heard. Andy's been working really hard to build it into the draft. You've seen iterative versions of the draft as he's been building these in. I know that there's a desire from some members of the Planning Commission at least to see that final clean version with everything in, and then you want to be able to say, okay, please add these additional options, because we know you've been reading and listening to public comment as well. And we're going to get there. It's going to take a little more patience, and it seems like a couple more meetings, but I just wanted to say that. And so you're respecting that you wanted to keep tonight's consideration just for 100, 200, 300, those 3 chapters of the SMP. I'll turn it over to Andy, and maybe if you have additional options or things you'd like to see in there, you can tell him that tonight so we can at least make those changes for next time.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And yeah, I just wanted to start out with a couple comments that I had. I wanted to clarify that since the last time we all spoke, there has not been a brand new draft that was released to the Planning Commission of the SMP. What I did was go back and pull all of the most recent version of the chapter that Planning Commission had already received, put them in one bundle and sent them out. Now I understand there may have been some issues with that. Doug, I hadn't heard that you were not able to download chapter 5. And if other folks had that issue, let me know. I can definitely get that out to you. I know I had to work with Eric because he wasn't getting my emails for some reason, and I had to more specifically target him to make sure I could get him that.
And on chapter 500 for me, pages
yes.
pages 3 through 14 did not come through for me at all.
And
okay.
That's the same for me.
Okay.
I got the first 3 pages and that was it.
Okay. Okay. So here's what I will do. I will go back and fix that, make sure you get the full copy, and then I can post those online as well. I'll work with Polly on that. And again, it's documents that you all had already received. The only thing that I did was go through them and make sure that they had a date stamp on them for when you received them, and that they all had page numbers, so that when we're looking at them later, you can say it's a document with this date and this page. But you know, they hadn't been changed since you last saw them. I did get an email from Barry Helverson about the shoreline environment designations on Lake Lawrence. So he brought that up during the public comment. I just wanted to let you all know that I'm looking into that. As you know, tonight we originally had planned to hear what items from public comment the Planning Commission would like to see reflected in the draft, as we're still continuing to incorporate edits into that draft. And as Jennifer said, we're okay holding off on that discussion, writ large until you see more materials. But a couple things that I did want to know from you. One would be exactly how you want to see things as I'm pulling it all together. Currently, I am continuing with the marking the draft with the green text that has been done since I took over the SMP. And if there are areas that are going to involve further decision making by the Planning Commission, option A, option B sort of thing, kind of calling those out in boxes. So that's one piece of it. And then there will also be a clean copy produced. So I'll take that, save it, open it under a new file, and create a clean copy that's just black ink on white paper, and so you can look at either one, whichever is easier for what you're doing or what the public's doing. So that's my plan. I just want to let you all know that and get any guidance on that. And also, since there has been a month since we repackaged all those other comments, I am certainly curious if you've got any impressions or things you want me to be folding in there. And it sounds like for the purposes of tonight, we're limiting that to the first 3 chapters. And so I'm ready to hear what input you have. Thank you.
Andrew, just based on your last comments, I'd like to see the next phase of changes that you put in here in a different colored ink. So you were green for the last go around. Let's do blue or purple or crimson or something for the next go around. Okay. So we know what's different.
Okay. And just so also for my benefit and something that I can, use when we're going through these drafts, I'm keeping track of why things change, so their color could be one way to look at it. But, if I want to know why we switch something, I've got my own little notes, so that can help as we go through these conversations. Are there any other thoughts from the Planning Commission about the color of ink? Because I know we've kind of gone around this before. I'm specifically wondering if this is something that a lot of you would like to see.
I'd like to see it just so that's easier for us to track, but how it's done, in colors and that kind of stuff, that, that's up to you. For all I care, you and Doug can pick colors. I don't care what color they are.
Okay. So, given that's, I just want to make sure that this is going to be something that comes back to the whole Planning Commission. So trying to make sure that that's the will of the body, essentially.
Can everyone nod who's like a fan of that? Because that helps us. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Anything else?
So I'm just going to say real quick, sorry to keep you here all night, Andy, but it is almost 9 o'clock. So if everybody's okay with that, I'm going to suggest that we just move on. And because I just checked again, and I hadn't made it chapter 500 yet, but I didn't get all of that either. So It's probably all of us.
All right. I apologize for that. I will fix that. And the last parting shot I have is that expect to see me back on October 7th. That's my next time I plan to come back before you all.
Andy, when do you think you'll get the answers from ecology to put in this thing?
I'm working on that and working through those things. So again, the draft that you saw is the last one that you officially received as Planning Commission, but some of that work has already been done. I'm working through all those issues. So I'm in communication with them and trying to narrow those things down. So the next draft you see should have either information incorporated in it in some manner of changed text, or if there is still a decision point before the Planning Commission, like, you could do 1 or 2, but ecology says it needs to be one of these ways, and then it'll be marked as a option for you guys to deliberate.
And will that be by the 7th or not?
That's the plan, yes. The next time you see a new draft, the plan is that it has everything that ecology has either said this is in state law, or we suggest this so that Planning Commission can talk about it, and things that you have asked for, and then you can take a look at that against all the public comments as well and see what additionally you want to incorporate. And ultimately, when we have a draft that you are all nodding about, then and only then will we move forward toward the public hearing.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we're gonna move on to staff updates. And since I forgot it in the beginning, Jennifer, you might want to mention the YouTube.
Yes, it's a little late to tell you, but y'all look just fine. We have been recording all of these Zoom Planning Commission meetings, and we're starting to post them through the Thurston County YouTube site. We started with August 19th, and we're going to be posting them from here on out. So it's for posterity, and we're all going to be famous. But it's not the easiest thing to find, but if folks are interested, they can go to the county's YouTube site and look for our Planning Commission meetings. So yeah. So that's the big new news. I don't have any other staff updates. You are going to be seeing the capital facilities plan or the capital improvement program, Appendix G of the comp plan at the September 16th meeting. So it's a very large file. We will be emailing it to you ahead of time. I'm hopeful it comes through just fine. Let me know immediately if it does not, or let Polly know. She'll be the one sending it to you because it's like 148 pages. And it's not track changes. It's basically repeal and replace because so many of the project descriptions and the tables and everything gets changed from year to year. So it's a lot to digest. We'll have experts from each department next time to highlight the major changes from last year's capital improvement plan, which you recall is a 6-year financing plan for all the stuff county uses public funds and other funds to build and maintain infrastructure-wise in the county. And that's it.
Will we still be hearing from Kevin Hansen?
Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. I didn't get to that at that last time. So he stands ready to receive questions from the Planning Commission. So if you have questions specifically related to RAP that you want answered, I suggest, I don't normally like to do this because I like to have all the questions brought before the whole body and then we all decide what are good questions. But given the fact that you have a public hearing coming up on October 7th, I'm going to invite anyone to submit specific hydrogeologic technical questions that you want Kevin to review. Just submit them to me and I'll put them all together, and Kevin knows this is a possibility that's coming. And then depending on turnaround time, we can have the answers back to you either at the next meeting, the 16th, or on the 7th, the night of the public hearing.
Okay, anything else?
Not from me.
Okay, we will move on to calendar. Is there anybody that will not be here on September 16th?
I will be out of town. If I can find a Wi-Fi spot, I will be here.
Okay. How about October 7th?
If I can sit in front of my computer with a new knee, I'll be here.
Okay. So, we should probably at some point, Polly or whoever's gonna do it, send out something for the 7th since we do have a public hearing.
Yeah, we'll get a reminder out to all Planning Commission members to let us know their availability for the 7th.
Okay, so does anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.